2025 was one of those years in gaming where on paper it should have been huge. We had big franchises releasing, massive ever-inflating budgets, long-awaited sequels, and more people than ever playing video games. But when I look back at how people actually responded, what people stuck with, and what they dropped, the picture is a lot more mixed. This video isn't a review roundup. I'm not going into depth on any one game here. I just want to talk about what gamers were excited for, what disappointed them, and what genuinely earned our time. Now, I wouldn't necessarily say these are the worst games released this year because there's always indie slop on Steam and low effort asset flips. And to be upfront, I haven't played every single game I'm gonna talk about, but these are the ones that left their audiences holding an empty bag. So in no particular order. I think everybody knew that Mind's Eye was gonna be here, because Mind's Eye is the clearest example this year of a game that just didn't connect with anybody at all. And I didn't hear about this game until the flood of negative news on YouTube. From launch, the conversation centered around technical issues and shallow gameplay mechanics and a general feeling that the game wasn't ready to be released. What's interesting though is that it didn't spark massive backlash. People shit all over the game for sure, but it was about a week and then the game was completely gone. And honestly, that's worse than complete outrage because at least outrage means that somebody cared about the game. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is a bit more complicated, because the game did sell very well early on, which shows that there was interest for the game at first, especially with how loved the first game was. That game has a cult following. But player sentiment shifted very fast, and a lot of discussion focused on how the game doubled down on realism and complexity, without really doing much to smooth out rough edges. Now, for fans of the first game, that was fine mostly, but for everybody else, it felt punishing, and there was also the aspect of blatant politics that were shoved into the game that did not help how the game was received. Instead of building on what the last game did great in terms of immersion and world building, it looks like they just doubled down on mechanics that slowed the pace of the game for the sake of realism, and ultimately gave in to the political pressure put on them by ESG and other moderation companies. Black Ops 7 was the third best-selling game of 2025, because Call of Duty always sells, but the player conversation around it was mostly exhaustion. The same systems, the same monetization, the same feeling that the series is running on fumes. I couldn't muster the strength myself to play this game, and all of my friends feel the same. The introduction of AI was notable because people hated the low-effort cosmetics and felt it was just another cut corner in a series known for that at this point. Overall, this game is ugly, with a terrible aesthetic, a laughable story, and we'll never get another Call of Duty like Modern Warfare 2019 or the OG Black Ops and Modern Warfare series. Borderlands 4 is funny because it crashed and burned on arrival. The fall from the highs of Borderlands 2 and 1 were never more noticeable. Bad PR leading up to the game's release made the landing less smooth, but it was clear the game was unfinished. This game is Borderlands, but it's familiar to a fault. The humor is generic Reddit humor, the gameplay didn't feel different or evolved in any way, and there was nothing new and creative pulling people back after the first few hours. I can't help but think there's gonna be another Borderlands game sooner or later, but I just hope that if they do plan to release another one, they try to learn from this situation because this game was a complete disaster. And finally, I know everybody was waiting for this one. This was one of the most controversial releases I can remember. The public dialogue surrounding this game was almost entirely negative. While professional reviewers praised the game for its inclusivity and wokeness, this fell on deaf ears as most gamers have become repulsed by this level of moral aggrandizing. A lot of players felt disconnected from the tone and direction of the game because the story didn't land the way earlier Dragon Age titles did, and the improvement in gameplay didn't feel like the payoff people had been waiting years for. The game sold poorly due to all the controversy surrounding its inclusivity at release, and when the game was finally released and people played it, it confirmed everybody's worst fears. It really was as bad as we all thought. Now let's get into the most disappointing games of 2025, because these are the titles that promised a lot and delivered very little. Doom: The Dark Ages had an unusual problem. A lot of players, including myself, felt it wasn't intense enough. Doom Eternal is one of my favorite games because it was intense and fast-paced, and this game didn't have to change anything to satisfy me. They changed what made the last two games so fun for a slower, clunkier parry simulator, and I don't want to be too negative because I'll convince myself to put this in the worst games category, but it wasn't terrible. It just wasn't what anyone really wanted as a Doom sequel. The disappointment with the release of the PC port of Spider-Man 2 wasn't necessarily the game, it was the experience. It's worth mentioning quickly the controversy surrounding identity politics in the game. The LGBTQ representation felt forced into the game for no reason. The outrage over Miles, a black character replacing Peter, a white character, as Spider-Man, and other things. But that wasn't why the PC port of the game was received so poorly. PC players reported performance issues, crashes, and instability that made the game near unplayable at launch, so instead of celebrating the arrival of another major PlayStation title on PC, the conversation became about Sony releasing unfinished games. And for a release that should have been a victory lap for Sony, that's a letdown. I know I said I wasn't putting this in any particular order and I wasn't ranking them, but if I had to say which game disappointed me the most this year, it had to be Assassin's Creed Shadows. And it's interesting because by most measurable standards, it was successful. Like Call of Duty, it sold well and people played it, and it wasn't wildly disliked. But the response lacked excitement. Players described it as polished, safe, and predictable, with a few glitches but nothing game-breaking. But there was no sense that it pushed the franchise forward in a meaningful way, and it did nothing to set itself apart from its obvious counterpart Ghost of Tsushima besides the two protagonist story. Controversy surrounded this game's release as well. One being that a black man was one of the two main characters in a game located in feudal Japan, and there was also controversy surrounding Japanese lawmakers raising concerns about how certain destructible in-game objects might be perceived, which led to changes in a day one patch. But it's really sad that this game left most underwhelmed because this could have been the Ninja Assassin's Creed game and I'm sure many people wanted as a kid. Silent Hill F was one of the most disappointing games of 2025, and that's largely because it was supposed to learn from the mistakes in tone and atmosphere that were made in the Silent Hill 2 remake. But it failed to deliver a compelling experience and completely missed the mark when trying to feel like older Silent Hill games that made the series popular in the first place. Its early marketing leaned heavily on atmosphere, shock value, and novelty of a new setting, creating expectation among the fans that this was an evolution of Silent Hill's psychological horror, but instead, the final product felt confused and more focused on surface-level discomfort like cheap body horror and The Last of Us style melee combat over the slow burn dread and symbolic storytelling that defined the franchise at its peak. The disappointment wasn't just about what Silent Hill F was, but what it wasn't, because longtime fans expected narrative depth and restrained horror and survival gameplay mechanics, but instead were met with uneven pacing and design choices that felt at odds with what fans wanted and what the series' legacy was. Rather than revitalizing Silent Hill for a new era, the game became another classic example of a name being used to sell an experience that didn't match the tone of the original.
Guy fitting the description does work in this here branch. His name is Eduardo Arnez. Him and his gay lover both work here. And I got the address. Paul, are you listening to me?
Yeah.
Oh, again with the rape of the culture. Can we go find these Spice Girls already and get this over with?
2 small coffee de jours.
Now there's plenty of other games I could have gone over in most disappointing or in worst games of 2025, but I think it's time to move on to the best games. So these are the games that I think set themselves apart in some way. Arc Raiders is probably the biggest player-driven success story of the year, and I already talked about this game in a recent video, and I'm thinking about doing a full review, so I'll keep it short, but the game launched strong, and most importantly, it maintained high player count. The game is getting more popular, and I still like playing it now as much as when I first got it. Battlefield 6 marked a real rebound for the franchise in my eyes. It was the best-selling game of last year, and it even managed to outpace Call of Duty in sales for the first time in a long time. That said, player engagement has dropped, and you can see that reflected in the Steam player count. But even still, for many players, including myself, it felt like Battlefield is finding its footing again, and finally moving in the right direction. It wasn't and still isn't perfect, but it's progress, and I really enjoy the game.
This country is infested with all manner of scum.
Good day, sir. Madam. Look at me, scrambling around, half insane.
This game is truly one of the best games ever, and it's one of the better games to come out last year. Its open world feels lonely on purpose, perfectly matching John Marston's slow, meaningless journey to save his family through the dying days of the Old West. The gunplay is simple but satisfying, and the campy old Rockstar writings that we miss from the older Rockstar games elevates this game to GOAT status. There were some performance issues on the PC release, but this game ran well on most mid and definitely high-end computers, so only people with very low-end computers really suffered from it, but besides that, there's nothing I could dock this game for. This game is easier to recommend than 99% of the games that released last year, so this has to be on this list even though it's old as fuck. Finally, games like Expedition 33 and Silksong were praised by everyone throughout the year, and for what it's worth, they absolutely dominated award shows. I considered it, but it felt wrong not to mention them briefly even though they aren't my personal favorite genre of game. Beyond individual games, 2025 was shaped by instability across the entire industry. Just this year, we had news of Warner Brothers Games shutting down multiple studios early in the year. Those being Monolith Productions, which are responsible for games like Fear, one of my personal favorites from the 360 generation, Gotham City Imposters, and the Middle-earth series. They also shut down Player First Games, which is solely responsible for multiverses, which is like Warner Brothers Smash Brothers, and Warner Brothers Games San Diego, which was acquired to make mobile games but never released anything before its closure. We saw EA lay off hundreds of employees. We saw Microsoft close 4% of its workforce and close the initiative and cancel multiple projects. Rockstar delayed Grand Theft Auto 6 twice in the same year. EA announced its intent to be acquired as a private company by the Saudi Arabian public investment fund Silver Lake and Affinity Partners for $55 billion. And Netflix acquired Warner Brothers Discovery, including its gaming division. Ubisoft restructured around a new subsidiary with Tencent taking a significant ownership stake. And even with all this restructuring and outside investment into the gaming industry, games are taking longer to make, they're costing more than ever, and still launching more buggy, broken, and filled with microtransactions than ever before. Looking back on 2025, it was pretty underwhelming, but in comparison to years like 2020, I guess it wasn't too bad. It did get saved by Arc Raiders at the buzzer, but overall I can't complain too much. It seems that players finally rewarded games that felt finished, focused, and respectful of their time, and they were less forgiving of forced diversity, technical issues, and franchise fatigue. If there's one takeaway from this year that I can see, it's this. Players are becoming more selective, not less enthusiastic, and going forward it seems like people have caught on as a whole to the way they've been programmed to expect less, and publishers are finally paying the price. If you watched this far, thank you, seriously. I appreciate anyone taking the time out of their day to listen, so drop your comments below, especially if you disagree, and I'll see you in the next one.